Today's daf, we're going to be learning a Sanhedrin daf Kuf Tet. It's the daf for Shabbat. We're going to get started just from the very bottom of Kuf Chet Amud Bet with Nahum Ish Gamzu, the very famous Nahum Ish Gamzu. Why was he famous? Because what Nahum Ish Gamzu, every time something happened, he would say Gamzu L'Tova, right? This is for the best. So Nahum Ish Gamzu have a regil de kol de hava salkale. Anything that would happen to him, Amar Gamzu L'Tova. This is also for the good. Yom Echad, Ba'u Yisrael Shaduri Daron LeKesar. The Jews wanted to give a gift to the Roman emperor. Amre Bahadema Nishader. They said, who should we send it with? Nishader Bahade Nahum Ish Gamzu. So they said, let's send it with Nahum Ish Gamzu to Melumad B'Nisimhu, because he knows how to do miracles. Kimatalahu Diola. By Lamebat, when he got to some place, he went to go to sleep. Amrele Ma'ika Bahadach. The people who were sleeping in the inn said, what do you have with you? Amar Lahu, Kamuvilna Kraga Lekesal. Okay, now here you have to be smart about what you say. He had a bad answer. He said, oh, I'm bringing a tax to the Kesar, to the emperor. I'm bringing him a gift. Kamu Balelia, so they realized he must have had something important in his bag. Kamu Balelia, Sharinu Lesifte. They opened his bag. Shaklu, right? They woke up in the middle of the night. They sneak into his room. They open up his bag. Ushaklu called the Havekabe. They took out everything in the bag. Umil uhu up milunuhu afra. They fill it up with dirt. Kimate lahatam. When he gets there, ishtakach afra. The Roman emperor sees that he gave him dirt. Amar achuchet kamachayechet b'Yehudai. He says, "What are the Jews trying to mock me?" Avku lemiktale. He takes him out to kill him. Amar Gamzu L'Tova. Nahum Ish Gamzu says it's all for the best, even though he's about to get killed. Ate Eliyahu v'idmele kechad minayu. Eliyahu comes and appears as one of the Romans. Amar Luhu. Dilma hai Afra me Afra d'Avram Avinuhu. Maybe this is the dirt from Avram Avinu. Davashade Afra have charve. He would throw the dust in the air or the dirt in the air, and it would turn to swords. Gili have a giri. And he would throw, remember what this word is? Gili, he would throw something else in the air, just check, and it would turn to arrows. Okay, so there was special stuff, that Avraham had. He had special powers, or again, maybe it wasn't his special powers, but it was specifically what he had. So let me just check again. Giri, right, his straw. He would throw straw in the air, and it would turn the gili is straw, and it would turn to giri, and turn to arrows. So again, but the dirt would turn to swords. So maybe this is the magic afar. That's what Eliyahu says to the Roman emperor or the Roman emperor's people. Baduk ve'eshkachu hachi. They checked it out, and in fact, that happened. Okay, remember, why did they send Nahum Ish Gamzu? Because he was Melumah B'Nisim. He knew how to do miracles. This, by the way, I want to just stop for a moment and point out that there's a story in Me'ilah of a Roman decree against the Jews, and they try to figure out who they're going to send. So the first thing they do is somebody, before they even decide who they're sending, somebody goes. His name is Rabbi Reuven Istrabuli, and he dresses up as one of them, which is very similar to Eliyahu. And then it doesn't work. But then they send Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And why did they send him? Because he's Milumah B'Nisim. So you have a very similar structure here of the Milumah B'Nisim and the dressing up and trying to give advice to the Romans from the inside. We'll see there's one other comparison, if I remember correctly. We'll see it when we get there. So then there was an area that the Romans were never successful at conquering. So they threw from the dirt by the city, onto their soldiers, it seems. And then all of a sudden they got swords and they were able to win the war. So again, all this miraculous stuff happened on account of that dirt. So what did they do? And this is very similar to the story with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. When he succeeds in saving the situation, there it was a different situation. But Ailuha Lebei Ginza. Okay, well, remember, we get to Me'ilah Daf Yud Zayin. Ailuha Lebei Ginza. So they bring him into their treasure, their room of treasures, okay, which is the same thing that happens to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai at the end of his story. Amre Shekol Denichalach. They say, take anything you want. Malyu L'sitva Dava. So he filled his suitcase full of gold. Ki hadar ata, when he went back, amrule hanach diore, the people who, right, he goes back, he stays at the same inn. So the people there say, my amtet lebe malka, what did you bring to the king? Amar lahu ma deshakle mehacha. Right, in other words, what are they saying? They see him now with all this gold, and they said, "What did you bring to the king? Like, how did you come back with all this gold?" They knew that you just brought dirt. So Amar le ma deshakle mehacha. Am telahatam. In other words, they assume maybe he figured something out. No, he says, "Whatever I took from here, I brought there." Shakle inu. Am telahatam. So what did they do? They took more of the dirt. They said, great, let's take the dirt. They bring it to Rome. Katlinu lahanach diore, and they all got killed because they claimed that they brought magic dirt and it wasn't, and the Romans killed them. Okay, new story. Dor haflaga. It's a great story, right? Dor haflaga en lem chelik lo'olam haba. So now we're going to continue in our list from the Mishnah of who doesn't have a portion in the world to come. My Avid, what did Dor haflaga do? Amri debe Rabbi Shila nivnei migdal v'naleh l'rakia v'nakeh oto b'kardumot. According to the first interpretation, we're going to see a bunch. In the house of Rabbi Shila, they wanted to build a migdal to get up to the heavens, all the way up, so they could hit the heavens with axes. Okay, Kadeshi Azuva Memav. They wanted the water to come down. Some people think they were scared there would be another Mabul, another flood, right? This is right after the flood. So they wanted to get all the water out of the heavens so that God wouldn't bring another flood, although God promised he wouldn't bring another flood, so it's a good question. Some people say they just didn't want to be dependent on rainwater, so they wanted to get all the water down so they could have the water and use it as they needed. In Ma'arava, they made fun of this explanation, and they said, in Cain, livnu achad b'tura. Then they should have built it, not from the ground, but they should, if all they wanted to do is to get all the way up, right? To get to something high, you need a ladder. But what are you going to do? You're going to put your ladder on the highest spot possible. So you're going to already be higher up. So it doesn't make any sense. Ela Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Bar Elazal, second interpretation, Nichleku l'shalosh kitot. They split up into three groups, okay? They have three different groups. And we're going to see that there were different motivations by each of the groups. One said, let's go up and sit there. In other words, they want to be close to heaven. They want to be as high up as possible, maybe close to God. We don't know exactly what they want up there, but let's go up together and we'll worship idols. Now, there seems to be some, see from the continuation, something about here that they wanted to join forces in order to worship idols. Something about joining together. Because they don't really need to do it up there, but they figured let's put our forces together and we'll worship idols. Let's go up there and we'll be able to make war. Now, war, if you always, right, you have the advantage if you're in a higher spot. So perhaps that's why they wanted to be in the higher spot. So Zosha Amweret, the group that said now we're going to learn that God did three different things to each one according to what they tried to do. So the one who said, let's go up and make a name for ourselves and we'll be close to the heavens, like it's almost like they're saying, we want to be God, as opposed to we want to worship other idols, right? One says we want to be God. So Hefitzam Hashem. Hashem distributed them, right? So they wouldn't have power in numbers and they got scattered everywhere. Zosha Omeret Na'aleven Asem Chama, the ones who said, let's go up and do war, Nasu Kofim v'Ruchot v'Shedim v'Lilin. They turned into monkeys and spirits and evil spirits and, all sorts of things, which basically lessened their power. They were no longer humans who could do these things. Or, again, it's not 100% clear how this related to it. And the third, Zosha Omeret Na'aleven Avod Avodah Zarah, Kisham Balal Hashem Sfat Kol Haaretz. Again, they're taking it from the Psukim. There, God messed up their languages. This is why it seems the theme of the Avodah Zarah was they said, let's come together and worship idols. And then once they couldn't speak the same language anymore, well, then they couldn't come together because they couldn't communicate with each other. Tanya, another brighta about this. Rabbi Natan Omer, Kulam l'shem avodah zarah nitkapnu. All of them wanted to build this thing so they could worship idols. How do we know this? K'tiv hacha na'aseh lanu shem. Right, that's what it says by Dor haflaga. They wanted to make a name. Uktiv hatam v'shem elohim acharim lo taskilu. Okay, and the name of other gods you shouldn't mention. Ma lahalan avodah zarah, afkan avodah zarah. So just like their shame is shem elohim acharim, also here na'aseh lanu shem, we want to make a god appear. We want to worship idols. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Migdal. Okay, so now this tower that they built, this Migdal Bavel, Tower of Babel, what happened to it? Now we have again this idea of threes. A third nisraf was burnt, shlish nivla, a third was swallowed up by the ground, and shlish kayam, and a third is still existing today. Amarav, Avir Migdal Meshakech. So Rav says the space around, if you come into the airspace of where this Migdal was or nearby, it makes you forget things. Amarav Yosef, Bavel, right? And this is the idea about Balalat Sfatam. They couldn't remember what language they were speaking anymore. They couldn't remember their language. Bavel and Borsif. So Rav Yosef says now, Bavel and Borsif, which are two places, which is, or in the area where the Tower of Bavel was, Siman Ra Torah. It's a bad sign for Torah because people forget their Torah if they're there. My Borsif, what is that? Amar Rabbi Asi, Bor Shafi. Bor that's empty, meaning an empty pit. Why? It's a pit that was emptied, like you had your knowledge and then it was taken away from you. Okay, that was all about Dor Flagan. Now we're moving to Anshe Stom, the people of Stom, Ein Lem Chedek L'Olam Haba. Tanu Rabbanan, Anshe Stom, Ein Lem Chedek L'Olam Haba. The people of Stom don't have a share in the world to come. Shene'emar, V'Anshe Stom, Ra'im V'Chatim La'Hashem Ma'od. They were bad and they were sinners. So now, again, why the double language? Ra'im Ba'olam Hazeh, they were bad in this world. V'Chata'im L'Olam Haba, and they're considered sinners in the world to come, meaning they won't have a portion. Amar Rav Yudah, a different interpretation. Ra'im bigufam v'chata'im b'mamonam. They're bad in their bodies. They sin. In other words, they sinned with their bodies and they sinned with their money. Bodies is sexual impropriety. Chata'im mamonam is with money. They stole money. All kinds of things like that. Ra'im b'gufam. How do we know this? As it says, how do we know that Ra goes with guf? We're going to quote a pasuk with Yosef and Esha Potiphar, which is going to be related to the sexual impropriety. How can I do this bad? Notice Ra'ah, which would be to sleep with Esha Potiphar, the wife of Potiphar, and I will be a sinner to God. Now we're going to have a problem because notice this pasuk has both Ra'im and Chata'im. So in a minute, you're going to see someone says the exact opposite, and they're going to bring the exact pasuk, but prove it from the word Chatati instead of Ra'ah. Okay, so if you're already thinking that, then you're in the right direction. Okay, what's the context here? This is a pasuk in Dvarim, chapter 15, where it says, you shouldn't think bad things. Lemol, which is what? Let's see, it's going to have to do with money. The Shemitah year is coming. And you're going to be stingy to your brothers, and you're going to or do bad in their eyes. But notice the word eyes here, but that's not the one we're going to focus on. You're going to have a poor brother, but since the loans are going to be canceled on the sabbatical year, you're basically not going to loan money. You won't give him. And you'll call to God, and he'll call to God, and you'll be a sinner. So here you have chata, and it's talking about money. So chet goes with money. Okay. La Hashem. Okay, what's this La Hashem? Okay, now we're back to Anshe Stom were Ra'im and Chataim La Hashem Me'od. We're going to have to say what's La Hashem and what's Me'od. La Hashem Zoberkat Hashem. They curse God. Okay, so number one, we have they did sexual impropriety. Number two, they stole people's money. Number three, they curse God. Me'od Shemitkavnim V'chotim. Me'od means they did it with real intention to sin, like to totally rebel against God. There was no onus in it whatsoever. No being forced, no some outside circumstance. No, they knew what they were doing and they didn't care. B'manita Tana, but in a different bright it says, as I already told you, Ra'im is b'mamonam and Chata'im is b'gufam. They switch the Ra'im and the Chata'im, and not a surprise, they're each going to bring the pasuk from the same place the other brought. Ra'im goes with mamonam, d'chtiv, Ra'in chab achicha evyon. And your eye will look badly at your brother and say, oh, I'm not going to give you charity. And there you see Ra'ah goes with money. And Chata'im b'gufam, d'chtiv v'chatati l'Elohim. Right, that's exactly what Yosef says. I'm going to sin to God if I engage in relations with Potiphar's wife. And then again, La Hashem Zoberkat Hashem, Me'od, this time it's different, Zo shvichut damim, that's spilling blood, killing people. Shene'emar v'gam dam naki shafach Menashe harbe Me'od. And there, right, Menashe spilled a lot of blood, and it said Me'od by murder. So therefore, Me'od here must also mean murder. Tanu Rabbanan, another about Anshe Stom. Now we want to figure out what caused their sin. So in fact, it's very ironic, or maybe not. Anshe Stom lo nitga'u ela b'shvil tova she'ishbi'a lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They became arrogant, right? The assumption is their arrogance brought upon their behavior. because of all the plenty that God brought them. So, in a sense, it's ironic because God caused it. In a sense, it's not ironic because when people have plenty, it often causes them to go off the path. And because of all the good that was bestowed upon them by God, they left, right? They rebelled. In other words, again, it made them arrogant. They thought it all came from them, and that caused them to sin. Umaktiv bahim, what does it say by them? Now, here's a pasuk in Eov, which isn't necessarily about stone, but they're going to attribute this, that this is describing stone. Okay, how they get from this to stone is a good question, perhaps because they talk about that underneath it's fire, and maybe because stone was destroyed by fire. Eretz mimenu yetze lechem. Okay, it's a land that from there's a lot of bread. And underneath it turned to fire. Now, this is not clear whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. Okay, because we're going to see this description of all these unbelievable things, but it sounds like maybe underneath, though, it turned to fire, like it wasn't so good. Okay, so the land, you can get bread from the land, but also underneath it turned to fire. Or maybe it means something positive, I'm not sure. Mikom sapir avaneha. Afrot zahavlo. Okay, this is like a place full of natural resources. Okay, first of all, we know Stone had all that salt, right? Natural resource of salt, but also we're going to say its stones were sapphire. Afrot zahavlo, the dust, the dirt there was full of gold. V'nitiv lo yidao ayit. There were no birds of prey that went there. V'lo shesafto ayin ayah. The falcons didn't get there at all. V'lo hidrichu b'nei shachatz. The proud beast didn't walk through there. Lo adalav shachal. And no lions came there. Okay, so this is like the safest place in the world to live and full of natural resources. Wouldn't this be the ideal place to be? Amru, so what went wrong? Well, they said, if we have bread coming out of the ground and gold coming from the ground, why do we need to let anybody into our city, right? Usually you let people in to do business. We don't need anything. We have everything here. All they're trying to do is just take our money. Let's just keep everybody out. We're going to make it forgotten, meaning we're going to make sure that no over regal, no passerby ever comes into our land. Shneamar, and here's a pasuk also from Eov in that chapter. Paratz nachal me'im gar. They broke a course of water far from inhabitants, like far from where people were living. Hanishkachim mini regal, far from where anybody would ever pass, any pedestrians. Dalu me'enosh now. Okay, and then they moved away from all people. Okay, they basically distanced people from them because they said, well, we have everything we need. What do we need people for? And that's why they started getting, right? That's why they didn't allow guests in and the whole Lot story, right? They just said, what do we need this for? Darish Rava, my dechtiv, what does it mean when it says, ad ana tahu tutu al ish? Okay, this again to be understood about Sodom and Amorah. It's a pasuk in Tehillim. Till when will you overwhelm a person? Okay, you will murder someone with a wall that's kind of about to fall or a fence that's tottering. This is a reference to that, the fact that they would find people who have money and they wanted their money. So what would they do? They would put them near a wall that's about to fall down. And then they would push the weak wall, knock it over, trample the person, kill them, right? And then they would take their money because they were dead. Darish Rava. Okay, we're going to hear all these things that the people of Sodom did. Some of these you might be familiar with. What does it mean when it says chatar b'choshech batim? If they dig into people's houses at night. Yomam chitmu lamo. In the day they would hide themselves. Lo yadu or. They didn't see light because they just went out at night. Again, what would they do according to the Midrash? So again, this is a pasuk in Eov, and they're basically saying this about Sodom. So what would they do? They would see people that have money. Mafkidim etzlo afarsimon. So they would leave some afarsimonim there. Now, afarsimonim have a beautiful smell. Okay, so what would they do? Now, the people would watch their afarsimonim for them, their persimmons, and to watch them, they would put them in their storehouses with all their stuff that they were protecting. Now, they would dig down, come into their house from underneath. They would smell like a dog. They would smell where the persimmon is because it has such a strong smell. Okay, Okay, they would come at night. There's a pasuk that talks about these bad people, and this is exactly what we're saying. The stone. Okay, they would come. This is the this is a pasuk from Tehillim. Okay, and it describes what the people do. They come in at night like a dog, and then they go around the city. Right, and they do this from house to house. And as soon as they smell the persimmon, they know exactly where the person's hiding it, and they go right there and they take all their stuff. Okay, what happened? They caused people to be naked, and people went around without clothes in the cold. They would take the donkeys of orphans. They would take the oxen of the widows, right? They're taking the advantage of the most disadvantaged people. Gvulot yasiga, right? In those days, they were the most disadvantaged because they didn't have someone to take care of them financially. Gvulot yasigu eder gazlu v'yiru. They basically took, right, they went into borders of other people and said, oh, that land is mine. They took people's flocks of sheep. V'hu likvarot yuval v'al gadish yishkod. Okay, and he will be, then they will take the people and lead them to their grave, and they would like pile them up in like, mass graves. Darash Rabbi Yossi b'tzipori. So this is a great story. Rabbi Yossi teaches this in Tzipori, this whole thing about how they went and dug down into the basements and how they left the persimmons. So after he taught this in Tzipori, people dug 300 tunnels in Tzipori because they said, this is the way to steal from people. In other words, this is what you say, don't give anyone any ideas. He gave them this idea and they said, oh, let's implement this. This is great. So all the people from the Beit Midrash went and basically, not all, but people came from the Beit Midrash and stole people's money. Seems kind of odd. So people came back, right? The people who were stolen from and said, what did you do, Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yossi, terrible. This is terrible. And, I can't believe you did this. What did he say to them? Yavet orche leganve. Like, I gave this to, sorry, they said to him, Yavet orche leganve. They said, you showed the way to the robbers. Amar Lahu, he said to them, Miava Yadana Datu Ganve. I didn't know there were robbers in my Gemara Shiur. I assumed the people who were coming to listen to learn Torah were good people. I didn't think they were robbers, right? Which again goes back to this idea we saw earlier in the chapter about, someone might look like they're religious and do certain things, but other things not. And this is, dangerous, obviously. When he died, the marzevim, all the gutters in Tzipori were full of blood. Sounds like a bad thing, but most of the commentaries think this is a good thing. It meant that people were crying so much. There was like tears of blood. Again, the fact that it's blood seems a little odd, and also the story puts him in a bit of a confusing light. He wasn't really in touch with the people, didn't really realize they were robbers. Anyway, it's unclear whether it's a positive or negative thing. Again, most of the commentaries think it's positive. There are some who view it as negative. Okay, moving on. Amri. This is right. Now, these are all sorts of tactics that the people in Sodom had. Torah, marechad yoma. If you have one ox, your job is you also have to take the oxen of the city one day a week. Okay, and take all the oxen to graze. But if you don't have any, then if you don't have any, lire tre yomi, then you have to take the oxen of other people's to graze for 2 days, which is counterintuitive because so the point is we're kind of, you have one, well then you have to take more. If you don't have any, then why should you have to do any at all? So Yatma Bar Malata, there was an orphan, the son of a widow. So they gave him their oxen to graze. Now he didn't have his own. Azal shaklinu v'katlinu. So then he took them all and he killed them all. A little strange. We're going to see why he does this. Amar lahu, he said to them, okay, this is a very smart orphan, very resourceful, turning out I'm a bet. Torah nishkol mashcha. Right now I have all these dead oxen. So I'm going to return them to you. How am I going to return them? Well, if you have one oxen, then you'll get the hide, right? What is he returning to them? The hide. You'll get the hide of one ox. Torah, if you didn't have any oxen, nishkol trei mashche, then you get the hide of 2 animals. So the people looked at him stunned. Hamrele, my hide. What is this? This makes no sense. I'm sorry, did I say it right? I said, delately, if you don't have any Torah, if you didn't have any oxen, you're going to get 2 hides, right? I think I said it right. Anyway, Amrule, my high. So they said, that's ridiculous. If I have no oxen, I'm going to get. And all the people who had oxen basically came back to complain. And now he's basically saying, I'm going to give 2 oxen to all the people who had no oxen, and you're only going to get one for your one. So that's counterintuitive. Amar lahu, sofdina kitchilatina. He says to him, well, the end of judgment is like the beginning of judgment. Meaning, matchilatina di le Torah mari chad yoma to le Torah mari trey yome. Well, in the beginning, right, when you gave me the oxen, you said, well, because you have no oxen, you have to graze everyone's oxen for 2 days. And the people who have one graze for 1 day. That makes no sense. So, af sofdina, but it's going to be the same. If I had none and I have to do more, then if the people who had none should get more back. So the lechad Torah lishkol chad, the late Torah, right? The one who had one should get one, but the late, the one who didn't have any Torah lishkol trey should get 2. And basically he said to them, right, I'm turning this on you. To Avar b'mabra, another thing they did, if you go on a boat to cross, like a ferry, to cross the river, native chad zuz, you have to pay 1 zuz to get across, right? There's like a bridge and you have to pay. Delo Avra b'mabra, if you don't go on in the bridge, but you walk, if you don't go in the ferry, but you walk yourself, it's not like there's a bridge, right? There is no bridge. You're walking in the water. You're either going by ferry or lo Avra b'mabra. If you don't go by ferry, but you walk through the water, or really means swim through the water, native trey, you have to pay double. So again, counterintuitive. I should have to pay more if I'm actually crossing by boat. Dahavale dara delivne. If there was someone who had a row of bricks. Ate kolcha v'chad shakal chada. So everybody came and took one. So now there's a different story. So on a row of bricks, basically, right, I have a row of bricks, and everybody came and took one of my bricks, like stole it from me, and took it and said, "This is mine." Amarle an chada shakle to have so, and each one said, oh, I only took 1 stone and 1 brick. In other words, and then in the end, I have no bricks, but I can't go bring 1,000,000 people to court and say, you stole 1 brick, you stole 1 brick. So they would basically destroy me by each one taking 1, and each one took something insignificant, but in the end, I'm left with nothing. If you had garlics or onions, everybody took 1. What, you're going to bring someone to court over stealing 1 garlic or 1 onion? And each one said, oh, I just took 1. There were 4 judges in Sodom. Here are their names. Shakrai, like from sheker, lies. Shakrarai, which also comes from lies, like a sheker. Zayafe, which is forged. And Matzlidina, one who perverts justice. Somebody hit their friend's wife and she miscarried. He would say to him, the judge would say, go give your wife to the guy. In other words, what happened? You lost your baby. So go give your wife to the guy who did it to her. Have him make you a baby. He'll replace your baby by having relations with her, and then you can have your wife back. If somebody cut off the ear of their friend's donkey, so the judges would say, the guy who injured your donkey, let him keep your donkey until the ear grows back, and then he'll give it back to you. Obviously ridiculous. If somebody hit their friend, okay, so let's say I hit you and I made you bleed, they would say to you, who was bleeding, Havle Igra, go pay Michelle for what she did because the Shakile Dama, because she bloodletted. She let blood out of your body. Remember, they view bloodletting as a positive thing. So if I hit you and I caused you to bleed, you actually have to pay me because I did you a favor. Yav arba azuze, da'avar b'mabra, yav arba zuze. So if you go on the ferry, you have to pay 4 zuzim. Da'avre b'maya, yav timni azuze. This is what we saw before. If you go through the water, though, go swimming in this place, right, you would have to pay 8 zuzim. You would have to pay double. So one time there was a launderer. He gets to Sodom. Amrulei havar ba'azuze. So they say to him, pay 4 zuz. You went through the water. Amar lahu ana b'maya avre. But I swam. I didn't go through the ferry. Amrulei, im can have timnaya. Then you should give us 8. Davar b'maya, because you went through the water. But lo yayiv, he was unwilling. He said, this is ridiculous. But you, so they hit him. Ata the kamei d'daina. So he goes in front of the judge and he says, they beat me up. They should have to pay me. Amrulei, havle igra de shakil achdama. give him money, right? And he said to the launderer, you have to pay money because they did bloodletting for you. You need both that and that. And that's why they mentioned this thing before. They repeated the thing about the going through the water because they wanted to bring the story with the combined of that and that. Okay. Now it's going to get a little more interesting because we're going to meet now Eliezer Evet Avraham, Itrami Lahatam. Okay, so Eliezer, the servant of Avraham, right, the famous servant who always comes up, especially in the Midrash, anytime Evet Avraham, it's Eliezer. So he's going to outwit the Sodomites, okay, the people from Sodom. What happened? So he gets there, he gets to Sodom, Pedaua, they beat him up. Ata l'kamei Dayana, comes before the judges, Amarle, Havle Igor, the Shakel Achdama. Said, you have to pay Eliezer because they took your blood. Shakel Galala, so he took a stone. Padi Iula Diana, so he throws the stone at the judge. Amar, my high. The judge says, what are you doing? Amar lay, says Tim. Igor dinafik liminech, havni alei. He says, I hit you with the stone. You're bleeding. You owe me money. Instead of paying me, just pay them directly. Smart. Bezuze didi kedekaime, right? You, the money. Okay, I'll read it again. Adra dinafik leminach, the money that you take that you should be paying me. Havni alei, give it to them. Bezuze didi, and my money kedekaime. Stay where it is. Havyale purayata. Okay, they had these beds. Tahavu megane ala orchin. Okay, this I remember from a kid, right? Learning this, they would put their guests on the bed. Ki marich, guys, if you were too long, too tall, they would cut your legs off. Ki goods, if you were too short, maftinle, they would stretch you out. So again, Eliezer, he was smart. Eliezer Eved Avraham, ikle lahatam, he got to there. Amrulay, kumgane apuria. They said, go, you can go to sleep. Here's a bed. Amar lahon, he said to them, Nidra nadre, oh, sorry, but I took a vow. Min yoma de mitat ima, from the day my mother died, as a sign of avilut for her, and respect for lo gani apuria. I never sleep on beds. And he got himself out of the whole bed catastrophe. When poor people would come, everyone would give him a dinar, which sounds very nice, but you'll see. And they would each write their name on the coin, and then they would give it to the poor person. And then they'd all refuse to give him bread. And when he would die, everyone would come back and say, oh, look, there's my coin. It has my name on it. And they would all take their money back. This is what they agreed between each of them. If anybody, they had like a thing here, an agreement. Anybody who invites anyone to a party, they're going to take away their cloak. Okay, so basically it was a way of getting them not to invite people, right? I guess people from the outside or people that weren't part of their inner circle to any of their events. So they would threaten them. So there was a party. Ikla who? Eliezer. Again, we're back to Eliezer, who knows how to outsmart them. Lahatam v'lo yave le'nama. And they wouldn't even give him bread. So he gets to a party, no one gives him bread. Kibai lemisa, when it came time to eat, Eliezer v'yativ l'sefer tekulu. He sits all the way behind everybody. Amrulay, they said to him, Manas manech lahacha, who invited you here? And what do they want to do? They want to find out who invited him and take away their cloak. Amrulay, lahudi yativ, the one who's sitting right next to me. Atzamantan, he invited me. Amar, so the guy said, the guy who's sitting next to him says, Dilmashami bi da anaz minte. He's worried someone's going to hear that he was the one who invited. Umashachele mane da hai gavra. And they're going to go take away my cloak. Shakil glime, he quickly got up, took his glima, Shakil glimeahu, his own cloak, to yetiv gabe, urat libatrai. Okay, so the guy who was sitting right next to him picks up his cloak and runs out of there before they steal it from him. Okay, or I should say, what's the word? The word, not disqualified, but they take it away from him. Can't find the word in my head. Okay, now, v'chein avidakulu, and this is what he kept doing. So whoever he would sit next to, he would say, "Oh, you invited me," and then the person said, "Oh my God, I hope nobody hears it." And they run out with their cloak. Adinafke kulu until everybody left, and then achleu l'sudata, and then he ate with the food that was left. Oh, there was a young woman. This is also one of the more famous ones. She was giving bread to a poor person from her jug. She hid bread in the jug so no one would see, and then she would give the bread to the poor person. Igali milta, but somehow people got onto her. And shafua duvsha ve'ukma al igar shura. Okay, so they gave her honey, and they stood her up I just have to check again what the Igor Shura is. Right, on the roof of the walls of the city. Okay, and Atazibore, and obviously with the honey, the bees came, va'achlua, and they ate her. Behind Tichtiv, and this is where we get it from. Vayomer Hashem za'akat Sdom va'amorah kiraba. Okay, the screaming from Sdom and Amorah, right, is so great. The screaming of the people who are suffering. Right? Could you imagine this girl full of honey and bees, and everyone's attacking, right, being totally attacking her, right? That was too much to bear. Va'amar Yehuda Amarav aliske riva. Okay, how do we get ki rabba to a riva? Riva is a young woman. So this young woman, her cries got up to God, and that's when God decides to get involved and save the people. Right? This had gone too far. So what we have here is a whole slew of stories of stone, terrible things they did, and mostly Eliezer. Although we did have one other story of people who were able to figure out how to outsmart them. But for the most part, people were not able to outsmart them. Right? This poor girl who tried to outsmart them, but it didn't work. Right? And they were pretty, down, rotten, evil people. Miragli, moving on to the next. The spies. How do we know that? Okay, so the people who gave the bad, spoke badly about Israel, died b'magefa. Vayamutu ba'olam hazeh, b'magefa la'olam haba. So it says in the beginning of the pasuk they died, and then at the end of the pasuk it says in a plague. Say, they died in this world, in a plague in the next world. Adat Korach, the group of people that went with Korach, they also have no place in the world to come. Shene'emal, Vatachas alehem haaretz, land, the ground covered them, right? They got swallowed up. That's ba'olam hazeh. But then it says, Vayovdu mitoch hakahal, and they were wiped out, lost, right? Destroyed from within the nation. That la'olam haba. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. But Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Alehem Amar Katuv. What do you mean? No, it says about Adat Korach, Hashem emitu mechayeh morit she'or vayal. God kills but brings back to life. God brings you down to the depths, like these people who were literally swallowed up by the earth, and they will come up. Okay, so they do have a part in the world to come. So we have a big machloket about Korach's group, whether they do have a share or don't have a share. From here, we're going to go off about Korach and the people who are with him. Tanu Rabbanit. Adat Korach en lam chedek l'olam haba, shene'emar. That's what we saw just before, exactly word for word. So we're seeing it in the Brighton now. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Omer, Harehin ka'avedah mitbakeshet. He agrees with the second opinion we saw before of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says they're like a lost item that's being searched for, meaning they do have hope. Okay, God is searching for them. Shneimar te'iti kaseh oved bakesh avdecha ki mitzvotecha lo shachachti. Okay, I'm like a wandering sheep or goat looking for my master, looking to work for you because mitzvotecha, I didn't forget your mitzvot. In other words, Adat Korach just went off the path, but they weren't totally off. Okay, and now we're going to see some more about them. Vayikach. Okay, now we're going to get to Korach himself. It says Vayikach Korach. Now, the problem is it says Korach took, but it never says what he took. So, Amarish Lakish Shalakach Mekach Ra La'atzmo. He took a bad decision. He took a bad sale, meaning he tried to do something, but it was a bad move. Okay, we didn't make a good choice here. Korach. Why is he called Korach? Shene'esa Korcha b'Yisrael. He caused a baldness in the Jewish people, meaning he caused a lot of people to be wiped out. Right, a big group there causes baldness. Ben Yitzhal. Why do they? Okay, we're basically going to go through his name. Korach ben Yitzhal, ben Kahat, ben Levi. Okay, why are we told all those names, and why also don't we get the name of Yaakov here? Because Levi was the son of Yaakov. So Ben Yitzhar, what do we get from this? Ben Shir Tiach Alav et Kol Haolam Kitzohoraim. Yitzhar milashon Tzoraim. Someone who burned the world, like heated up the world, meaning he got all these people to go with him, and then they ended up getting swallowed in the ground. It was so he heated them up so hot, like the sun in the mid-afternoon. Ben Kahat, Ben Sheikash Shine Molidav. Okay, he blunted the teeth of his forefathers, meaning he shamed them. Ben Levi, Ben Shenasa Levaya beGehenom. Levi milashon Levaya. He's an escort. He became an escort where? In hell. Lichshav Nami Ben Yaakov. Why didn't you say Ben Yaakov? Because you could have said Ben She'akav Atzmo leGehenom. Someone who contorted himself until he gets to hell. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak, Yaakov bikesh rachamim al atzmo. It's because Yaakov specifically asked for rachamim not to be involved in this. How do we know? Shneimar, right? What does he say to Shimon and Levi? Shimon and Levi achim hem, right? And it says in the continuation there, Besodam al tavo nafshi. I don't want to be involved in their secrets. Bekoholam al techad odi. And when they get together, I don't want to be there. I don't want my kavod, my respect to be there. So Besodam al tavo nafshi elu miraglim. That's the spies. I don't want to be involved with those from my tribes, right, of Shimon and Levi who were spies. And B'ka'alam al techad kvodi ze adat Korach. That's Korach because they were a kahal, right? They got together. Okay, what about Datan and Aviram that went with him? What do we darshan with those names? Datan sha'avar al dat el. He went against the religion of God. Aviram she'iber atzmo me'asot tshuva. He braced himself, like he made himself very strong so that he wouldn't do tshuva. In other words, he stuck so strong to his principles to be with Korach that he had to work hard to stop himself from doing tshuva. It's interesting. Usually you think it's hard to do tshuva. This is saying it was hard for him to prevent himself, right, to stop himself, hold himself back from doing tshuva. The On. Okay, what about On ben Pelet? And we're going to end with him. He was an interesting character that appears in the beginning and never appears at the end of the story. He disappears. And the question is, what happened to him, right? The rabbis assume that if he was still there, he would have been mentioned, so he must have left and he must not have gotten killed. So we're going to see, what made him unique and how did he get out of it? And we're going to learn about his famous wife. On she'ashav ba'aninut. Okay, he sat there ba'aninut, like in he basically did tshuva. Like he said, I'm sad about what I'm doing. I don't want to be here. Pelet shenasulo plaot. The wonders happened to him. Ben Reuven, ben shera'a v'hivin. He saw and he understood. But we're going to learn it wasn't really him who saw and understood. It was his wife. Amar Rav, ben Pelet ishto hitzilato. His wife saved him according to Rav. Amrale, she said to him, "My nafkalach mina. What are you going to gain from this? Right? You're going with these people, but it's either, right, Moshe or Korach. Now, Imar, Rabbah, if Moshe is the one in charge, on Talmida, you're just a student of his. But Imar, Rabbah, if Korach's in charge, on a Talmida, you're also just a student. So what do you care whether you're a student of Korach's or you're a student of Moshe's? Why are you going and rebelling when you have nothing to gain from this? You have no personal gain. You're still going to be a student. Amala. So he says to her, a great line, what should I do though? I was with them when they decided to do this, and I swore it's too late. I can't change my mind. Amrale, she says to him, Yadana dekula knista kadisha ninu, or knishta kadishta ninu. I know that all of this group is kedoshim. How do I know that? They're all holy people. Dichtiv ki kolei da kulam kedoshim. Right? That's the pasuk there. It says they came to Moshe, and what did they say? Everyone is sanctified, right? Ubitocham Hashem, and who made you boss? Okay, but they're basically saying we're all good people. So, okay, what does that have to do with anything? She says, listen, sit and I'll save you. But it seems like he wasn't so amenable because what does she have to do to make sure? So she feeds him wine. This is always like most good women in the Talmud, in the Torah who are trying to, or in Tanakh, who are trying to save, right, a situation or wanting to, figure out how to overpower the men. They get them drunk, right? Because then the men are weak. They can do what the women want them to do. So he basically she gets him drunk and he goes to sleep. She sits by the door. I'm going to go a bit into the next daf. She undoes her hair to make it look like she's going to shower and wash her hair. Everybody who saw her left. Okay, basically this is what kulam kedoshim. They're all very careful about certain things anyway, like tzniut. So they saw her with her hair down, they left. So they all kept coming for On, but they kept turning away because they saw the wife and they thought she was about to shower. So in the meanwhile, she pushed them off enough that they already got swallowed up in the ground, and then On gets saved. Okay, so that's the end of our daf. Quick review. We started with the story of Nahum ish Gamzu and that whole interesting story. We went to Dora Flaga. We went on Chase Stone. We went through all these people. What did they do wrong? And then we went to the Meraglim, and we finished with Adat Korach, and we went through all the different characters. With that, we finished for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov.